Oh yeah, lots of, I remember lots of conversations. I mean, he and I spent a lot of time together.
What would you say to a parent you lost too young? Lisa Marie Presley spent 45 years carrying words meant for her father, Elvis Presley. The little girl who once fell asleep in the king of rock and roll's arms grew into a woman haunted by everything left unsaid. In her final interviews before her tragic death in January 2023, Lisa Marie revealed the conversations she wished she could have had with Elvis. These weren't the polished statements of a celebrity protecting a legacy. These were the raw, unfiltered words of a daughter who never stopped missing her daddy. What she said will break your heart and change how you see both the king and the daughter who carried his memory. This is the story of love, loss, and the final words that took 45 years to find their voice. Daddy's little girl. In the sprawling halls of Graceland, where gold records lined the walls and music never seemed to stop playing, there lived a little girl who knew nothing of fame or fortune. To her, the man the world called the king of rock and roll was simply Daddy. Lisa Marie Presley's earliest memories weren't of screaming fans or sold-out concerts. They were of late-night golf cart rides around the estate, of falling asleep in her father's arms while he hummed melodies that would never make it to any album. Elvis Presley may have belonged to the world, but between the hours of midnight and dawn, he belonged entirely to his daughter. Those were their sacred hours, when the demands of stardom couldn't reach them. Lisa Marie would later describe these moments as existing in a bubble where time stood still, and her father was just a man who made her laugh until her sides hurt. The Graceland of her childhood was a magical kingdom where anything seemed possible. Her father would transform into different characters, doing voices and impressions that delighted her beyond measure. Sometimes he was a cowboy, sometimes a mysterious stranger, but always he was completely present with her. These weren't the calculated performances of an entertainer. These were the spontaneous gifts of a father desperate to give his daughter a normal childhood despite their extraordinary circumstances. In those precious moments, Lisa Marie saw what the world never could. She witnessed Elvis's vulnerability, his fears about his career, his concerns about being a good father. She was the keeper of his most private thoughts, the repository of his dreams that had nothing to do with music or fame. To her, he wasn't an icon. He was the man who checked under her bed for monsters and promised her that everything would always be okay. But even as a child, Lisa Marie sensed the weight her father carried. She noticed how his smile sometimes didn't reach his eyes, how he seemed to retreat into himself when the house filled with visitors. She became protective of him in a way that children shouldn't have to be protective of their parents. This role reversal would define their relationship and haunt her long after he was gone. The world knew Elvis Presley as larger than life, but Lisa Marie knew him as beautifully, heartbreakingly human. In her final interviews, she would speak of these memories with a mixture of joy and profound sadness. These moments of pure father-daughter connection became the measuring stick against which she would judge every relationship for the rest of her life. No one would ever love her as unconditionally as her daddy did, and no one would ever disappoint her as completely as he would. When the music stopped, August 16, 1977, the date is seared into Lisa Marie Presley's memory, not as a historical milestone, but as the moment her childhood ended forever. She was 9 years old enough to understand death, but too young to comprehend its permanence. The morning started like any other at Graceland, but by afternoon the silence that filled the mansion would echo for the rest of her life. Lisa Marie discovered her father's body in the bathroom adjoining his bedroom. In that instant, the little girl who had felt invincible under her father's protection was confronted with the most adult reality imaginable. The man who had promised her that everything would be okay could no longer keep that promise. The world stopped spinning, though somehow it kept moving around her. The hours that followed became a blur of chaos and confusion. Paramedics rushed through the halls where she had played hide-and-seek. Reporters gathered outside the gates that had always kept the world at bay. Phone calls brought relatives she barely knew, all of them crying, all of them trying to explain something that made no sense. How do you tell a 9-year-old that her hero, her protector, her whole world is gone forever? What haunted Lisa Marie most wasn't just the loss, but the way the world immediately claimed her grief. Elvis Presley belonged to millions of fans, and suddenly their mourning seemed to matter more than hers. She watched from her bedroom window as thousands of people gathered outside Graceland crying for a man they had never held, never laughed with, never been tucked into bed by. Their grief was real, but it couldn't touch the devastation of a little girl who would never hear her father's voice calling her name again. In her final interviews, Lisa Marie spoke about the immediate aftermath with startling clarity. She remembered the eerie quiet that settled over Graceland once the music stopped playing. Elvis had always filled the house with sound, whether he was rehearsing, recording, or simply humming while he walked through the rooms. Without him, the mansion felt like a mausoleum, beautiful but lifeless. The funeral became another surreal experience where her private pain intersected with public spectacle. Dressed in black, trying to be brave for the cameras, Lisa Marie stood at her father's casket knowing that this moment was being broadcast to the world. She wanted to scream, to tell everyone to leave, to let her say goodbye in private. Instead, she stood quietly, learning the first of many lessons about being Elvis Presley's daughter. Even in death, he would never truly belong to her alone. That night, as Graceland emptied of mourners and reporters, Lisa Marie lay in her bed listening to silence. For the first time in her life, there was no music drifting through the halls, no sound of her father's footsteps, no possibility that he might knock on her door for one of their late-night adventures. The king of rock and roll was gone, and with him, the magical kingdom of her childhood had disappeared forever. Growing up Presley. Being Elvis Presley's daughter meant living in a shadow so large it blocked out the sun. For Lisa Marie Presley, that shadow wasn't just fame. It was expectation, judgment, and the constant reminder that she was never free to just be herself. As a teenager, the weight of her father's legacy became suffocating. Every step she took was measured against his memory. Every choice was questioned with, what would Elvis have wanted? The little girl who once felt special as Daddy's pride now felt trapped by the very name that defined her. High school wasn't a place to blend in, it was a battlefield. Some classmates idolized her simply for who her father was. Others resented her for it. Teachers treated her differently too, sometimes overly kind, sometimes overly strict. She wasn't allowed the luxury of normal mistakes. Any slip, no matter how small, was magnified. Elvis Presley's daughter messed up. And then there was the pressure to be perfect. The world had turned Elvis into a saint after his death, forgetting his human struggles. Lisa Marie was expected to carry that saintly image even while battling her own grief and anger. So she started to push back, not just against authority, but against the chains of expectation. Her mother, Priscilla, tried to hold things together. But how do you raise a teenager when the world is watching your every move? Every argument risked becoming tabloid gossip. Every rebellion was dissected by strangers who claimed to know what Elvis would have thought. Lisa Marie felt like her whole life was a stage play, where she was forced to smile and perform the role of the grateful daughter, even when inside she wanted to scream. Music should have been her safe space. It was in her blood. She had her father's ear for melody, his power to pour raw emotion into a song. But instead of freedom, music became a curse. Every time she sang, people compared her to Elvis. Every lyric she wrote was measured against his work. What should have been a gift tying her to her father instead became another heavy chain she could never escape. And then there was dating. For Lisa Marie, it was almost impossible. Boys were either intimidated by her last name or attracted to it for the wrong reasons. Some wanted to touch Elvis's memory through her. Others saw her as a prize, a piece of rock and roll history. Very few wanted her, the real Lisa Marie. Years later, she described those teenage years as feeling like she was drowning in other people's expectations. Everyone had advice on how she should honor her father. Everyone had an opinion on how she should behave, but almost no one stopped to ask, what did Lisa Marie want? So she began making choices that shocked those around her, not out of rebellion for its own sake, but out of desperation. She wanted to make her own mistakes, write her own story, and finally break free from the weight of being Elvis Presley's daughter. Because behind the fame, the fortune, and the family name, Lisa Marie was just a girl searching for herself, following in his footsteps. Music wasn't just a passion for Lisa Marie Presley. It was the language she shared with her father, the invisible thread that bound them across life and death. When she finally pursued a recording career, it wasn't about fame. It was about holding the conversations with Elvis she could never have in person. Every song became a letter to him, every performance an attempt to bridge the gap between who he was and who she was becoming. Her debut album, To Whom It May Concern, released in 2023, was deeply personal, yet impossibly public. Critics moved quickly, dissecting her voice, searching for Elvis in every note. They analyzed her lyrics, hunting for references to her father. But what they overlooked was her courage. The courage to walk into the arena where Elvis had been king, knowing she could never measure up in the public's eyes. The recording process was an emotional storm. She worked in studios where Elvis had recorded, surrounded by musicians who had once played with him. His presence lingered, sometimes comforting, other times crushing, reminding her of his absence. Still, she pressed on, because for Lisa Marie, music was the last living connection she had to him. Her song Lights Out became her anthem of struggle, but listeners tied it to Elvis's death. Sinking In was about loss and survival, yet fans heard only his legacy. Once again, her voice was trapped in a cycle where everything was filtered through the shadow of her father. Then came the surprise: success. The album proved Lisa Marie wasn't a vanity act. She had real talent, raw and undeniable. But recognition carried its own burden. Now she wasn't just Elvis's daughter. She was Elvis's daughter and a recording artist. The comparisons sharpened, the pressure grew. Touring added new challenges. Fans expected Elvis covers or songs that sounded like him. When Lisa Marie performed her own material, some felt disappointed. Each performance became a balancing act. Honor her father while fighting for her own voice. Her second album, Now What?, released in 2025, revealed her growth but also her ongoing battle. Even its title asked the question haunting her life: now what? How do you build your own kingdom when the world only sees you as the daughter of the king of rock and roll? In later interviews, Lisa Marie spoke with honesty. Music was her greatest gift and her heaviest burden. It connected her to Elvis, but it also chained her to grief. Through her songs, she could finally speak to him. She could share her struggles, her fears, her victories, and her enduring love. For Lisa Marie Presley, music was never just a career. It was her therapy, her prayer, and her everlasting love letter to the father who gave her life and left far too soon. The struggles he left behind. The demons that haunted Elvis Presley didn't die with him. They passed down like a dark inheritance to his daughter. Lisa Marie Presley found herself fighting battles that felt hauntingly familiar. Battles with the same pain that had claimed her father's life. Addiction, depression, and the crushing weight of public expectation became her own personal hell. And in the struggle, she began to understand her father in ways she had never wanted to. Prescription drugs, the very substances that destroyed Elvis, became Lisa Marie's escape. What began as medication for real pain twisted into something darker, a chemical barrier between her and the weight of reality. She later admitted it was like watching herself repeat her father's mistakes in slow motion, unable to stop even though she knew how the story ended. Her personal life only added fuel to the fire. Every marriage became tabloid fodder. The union with Michael Jackson fascinated the world. Two children of extraordinary fame, both scarred by it, finding each other in the chaos. To the public, it looked like a fairy tale. But to Lisa Marie, it was complicated, haunted. Jackson understood the burden of fame, but he couldn't understand the specific pain of losing a parent to it. Then came Nicolas Cage. Their marriage lasted only months, collapsing under pressure before it had even begun. Each failure chipped away at Lisa Marie's sense of self. She started believing she was broken, that losing Elvis had damaged something inside her beyond repair. She measured herself by those failures, not by the quiet strength it took to survive what she had endured. Danny Keogh gave her children, the greatest joy of her life, and provided stability for a time. Lisa Marie desperately wanted to be the kind of mother she felt she had lost when Elvis died. She longed to give her kids the safety and consistency she never had. But the cycle of addiction and depression returned, disrupting even her best intentions. Her struggles with substances weren't only about numbing pain, they were about trying to understand her father. In her darkest hours, she felt terrifyingly connected to him. She began to comprehend the crushing pressure he had lived under, the impossibility of being human while the world demanded he be superhuman. The same pills that killed him became her way of walking in his shoes, even as they threatened to drag her down the same fatal road. And then there were the financial pressures. Maintaining Graceland and her father's estate wasn't just about memory, it was about survival. Every business decision was picked apart, every choice questioned. Lisa Marie wasn't just Elvis's daughter, she was the keeper of his empire. The weight of carrying his legacy alone was staggering. In her later interviews, Lisa Marie spoke with heartbreaking honesty. She said she felt like she was drowning in her father's shadow, even while being the only one who truly understood what he endured. The same substances that destroyed him became, for her, a twisted lifeline, a way to stay connected to him. But she also recognized the truth. To truly honor Elvis, she had to break the cycle. She had to survive the inheritance of pain he had unknowingly left her. Graceland's guardian. Graceland wasn't just a mansion, it was Lisa Marie Presley's childhood, her sanctuary, and later, her greatest responsibility. When she inherited the estate, she also inherited an impossible task, sharing her most private memories with a world that would never fully understand their meaning. Every choice about her father's home became a tug-of-war between preserving her own connection to Elvis and honoring the millions of fans who saw Graceland as holy ground. The decision to open Graceland to public tours was agonizing. These were the rooms where she had played as a child, where she had learned to walk, where she had last seen her father alive, and now those rooms would be filled with strangers, snapping photos, buying souvenirs, walking through the most intimate corners of her life. Even her own bedroom, her safe place during her parents' divorce, became part of the tour. The kitchen where she had once shared breakfast with Elvis now echoed with the voices of tourists instead of family. But Lisa Marie understood something deeper. Graceland didn't belong to just her. Elvis's fans had loved him through every high and low, had mourned him with real grief, and they deserved to see the place where their hero had lived. Opening the mansion wasn't just business, it was her gift to them, a way to share the Elvis she had known with those who had loved him from afar, a gesture of generosity that came with tremendous personal cost. Running her father's estate was unlike anything Elvis himself could have imagined. Licensing deals, merchandise, business partnerships, all of it passed through Lisa Marie. She became the final authority on what honored Elvis's memory and what risked exploiting it. Every decision carried the heavy weight of legacy. Every contract brought the fear that she might somehow tarnish what her father had built with his own two hands. The business side of being Elvis's daughter was relentless. Lawyers, accountants, and managers surrounded her, all with proposals, all claiming to have Elvis's best interest at heart. But Lisa Marie had to guard not just the financial value of Graceland, but its soul. She wasn't just a daughter anymore. She was CEO, protector, and keeper of her father's flame. Returning to Graceland as an adult stirred conflicting emotions. Walking through rooms frozen in time, Lisa Marie felt like a ghost inside her own childhood home. Every detail was preserved exactly as Elvis had left it. But the life was gone. What had once been a vibrant family home was now a museum. Beautiful, yes, but lifeless. And yet, when fans came to Graceland, they brought it alive in their own way. Some wept at Elvis's grave. Others left flowers, letters, and whispered prayers. Watching them, Lisa Marie realized something profound. Elvis's death had created thousands of orphans, people who had lost someone they never truly knew but felt deeply connected to. For the first time, she understood she wasn't really alone in her grief. The meditation garden where Elvis was buried became sacred ground. Standing at her father's grave, surrounded by strangers paying their respects, Lisa Marie felt the full weight of being his daughter. He belonged to everyone and to no one, universally loved, universally mourned, but privately understood only by her. In her last interviews, she admitted Graceland was both her greatest burden and her most sacred duty. The place where Elvis lived forever, and the place she would one day choose to join him. A mother's heart. Motherhood transformed Lisa Marie Presley in ways she never expected. The moment she held her first child, she finally understood the depth of love her father must have felt for her. Every protective instinct, every burst of joy, every fear about the future suddenly made sense. She was determined to give her children what Elvis's death had stolen from her: security, consistency, and the promise that their parent would always be there. Her daughter Riley and son Benjamin became her anchors in a world that had always felt unstable. Through them, Lisa Marie experienced the small joys her own childhood had been denied: normal school events, family dinners, bedtime stories untouched by the chaos of fame. She fought fiercely to protect them from the spotlight that had once consumed her own life, determined to give them the choices she had never been given. Sharing stories about Elvis required careful balance. She wanted her children to know their grandfather as she had known him: funny, loving, endlessly devoted. She told them about the man who sang her to sleep, who made her laugh until she cried, who promised her the moon and stars. But she was cautious about sharing the pain, the struggles, the demons, and the weight of his death. Parenting was already hard. Parenting with Elvis's last name made it nearly impossible. School events brought the risk of cameras. Vacations required security. Even a trip to the grocery store could turn into a media circus. Lisa Marie worked tirelessly to build normalcy in an abnormal world, to be the present, consistent mother she had longed for after losing her father. Her twins with Michael Jackson, Harper and Finley, brought new challenges. Their heritage, Elvis and Jackson combined, created a level of media obsession few could imagine. Lisa Marie became fiercely protective, navigating custody battles and paparazzi while shielding her daughters from a world too eager to consume their lives. She wanted them to know their grandfather through her words, not through the endless churn of tabloids. Benjamin, her son with Danny Keough, carried an even deeper connection to Elvis. He didn't just inherit the Presley name, he inherited the music. His natural talent filled Lisa Marie with both pride and fear. She had lived the dangers of fame firsthand, had seen the pressure crush sensitive souls like her father. Watching Benjamin step into music was like watching history repeat, but this time she was determined to shield him. As her children grew older, the stories about Elvis changed. The bedtime tales of a loving grandfather gave way to harder conversations about legacy, about fame, about the cost of being extraordinary. Lisa Marie tried to prepare them for a world that would never see them as just themselves, but always as extensions of the king of rock and roll. Then came the tragedy that shattered her life. In 2020, Benjamin died by suicide at just 27, the same age so many other musicians had been lost. For Lisa Marie, it was more than grief. It was a cruel echo of her father's pain. Losing her son, her anchor, connected her directly to Elvis in a way that terrified her. She spoke of finally understanding the depth of his despair, that when you love so deeply, the loss can make existence itself feel unbearable. Through motherhood, Lisa Marie learned what it meant to love completely. Through loss, she finally understood why her father had struggled to survive. The gift of love and the weight of grief had become her inheritance and her final truth, final conversations. In her final interviews, Lisa Marie Presley finally found the courage to say everything she had been carrying for 45 years. The conversation she had imagined since she was 9 years old poured out with raw honesty and devastating beauty. These weren't polished statements from a celebrity. They were the words of a daughter who had never stopped talking to her daddy, even when he couldn't answer. She spoke about forgiveness, about finally understanding the man behind the legend. As a child, she had idolized him. As a teenager, she had resented him. As an adult, she struggled to reconcile the father with the icon. But now, with age and perspective, she saw him as a complete human being. His flaws were no longer betrayals, but proof of his humanity. The pills, the loneliness, the struggles, once seen as choices, were now symptoms of unbearable pain she had come to recognize in her own life. Lisa Marie confessed that she wished for conversations that would never happen. Conversations about addiction, about the crushing weight of fame, about the impossible price of being extraordinary in an ordinary world. She wanted to tell him she understood why the pills felt like relief, why the pressure seemed unlivable, why escape sometimes looked like the only way out. She had walked those same dark paths, she had survived them, and she wanted him to know that survival was possible. Her regrets weren't about mistakes, her regrets were about time. She wished she had been old enough to be his friend, not just his daughter. She longed for talks about music, about creativity, about the cost of pouring your soul out on stage every night. She wanted to protect him, the way he had once tried to protect her. But time had stolen that chance. Through tears, she admitted she had never really stopped talking to Elvis. In her darkest battles with addiction, she had whispered to him for guidance. In the struggles of motherhood, she had asked him for advice. When faced with impossible business decisions about his estate, she wondered what he would want. These one-sided conversations became her anchor, the thread that connected them across life and death. She spoke of a powerful realization, that her entire life had been shaped by trying to understand him, honor him, and prove herself worthy of being his daughter. The perfectionism, the crushing responsibility, the desperate need to make him proud, all traced back to a 9-year-old girl who just wanted her daddy's approval. And in her final years, she admitted she had finally learned something vital: to be proud of herself, even without it. The most moving moments came when Lisa Marie addressed Elvis directly, as if he were sitting across from her. She told him about his grandchildren, about Benjamin, who inherited his talent and his sensitivity, about Riley, whose strength carried the family forward, about the twins, Harper and Finley, who embodied his spirit in their own unique ways. She wanted him to know that his love had multiplied, that his essence lived on in every generation. Her last words about Elvis were the simplest yet the most profound. She missed him every day. She forgave him everything. She understood him completely, and she loved him beyond measure. After decades of silence, Lisa Marie Presley finally finished the conversation she had begun at 9 years old, a conversation that would continue until the day she could tell him face to face, love never dies. On January 12, 2023, Lisa Marie Presley attended the Golden Globe Awards, celebrating the film that told her parents' story. She appeared radiant, proud of how her father was portrayed, grateful that the world could see Elvis through the lens of love rather than tragedy. It would be her final public appearance, her last opportunity to speak about the man who had defined every moment of her 54 years. Just 2 days later, Lisa Marie suffered cardiac arrest at her home in Calabasas. Emergency responders fought desperately to save Elvis Presley's daughter, but some forces are stronger than medicine. At 54, the very age her father had been when he died, Lisa Marie's heart simply stopped. The daughter who had spent her life longing for her daddy was finally going home to him. The decision to bury Lisa Marie at Graceland, beside her father and her son Benjamin, completed a circle that began from that painful night at Graceland to the years of defending his name. She became more than Elvis's daughter. She was his keeper, his voice, his living proof that love outlives death. And now at last she rests beside him, reunited with the king of rock and roll, not as a headline but as a daughter returning home. The little girl who once fell asleep in her father's arms has finally found peace in his. Lisa Marie's life leaves us one lasting truth: grief may break us, but love endures, waits, and reunites. If this touched your heart, like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe for more stories that remind us we're never truly alone.